Well, salams, peace, hey y'all. Yesterday, just like anybody else, I was cruising through YouTube and I came across a video. I'm gonna include a link in the description below this video. And they were talking about, sort of the fantastic things you find when you are in this country with, 17,000 islands or something like that, or 170, I can't remember which one it is, 1,700 or 17,000. In any case, they include little tiny islands, but we're an archipelago and there are a lot of islands. So, one of my favorite pastimes I call island hopping. And that allows me to plan a 3-4 day holiday to get from my island, Java, and my city to other islands. Now, I want to do a separate video about the logistics of island hopping because, yeah, it sounds lovely and entertaining and fun and all that kind of stuff, but I have a sneaky suspicion that sometimes people don't really understand that you don't just hop. You have to take a lot of little mini steps, and these all have to line up in order for you to, get to whatever the places that you're getting to, and then get back from there. So more on that later. This is just to say that when I came across this video yesterday, it had so many of the places that I have hopped to and places that I have driven to and places that I have flown to and, and the like, because, it's every day's adventure. And of course, the colors, in terms of the presentation of this video were super fantastic. And when I take my own pictures, yes, I get some of the turquoise of the ocean. I get some of the lime green of the new rice plants. I get some of the darker green of the lush tropical forest. Yes, I get all of those, and you can see in my photos and little videos, you can see, what this presentation presented. And I actually had my, mouth open, like, jaw dropped, just to see these things being highlighted in somebody else's video. And so the purpose of this video is to tell you a little bit about, well, why Indonesia? Of all the countries in the world, of all the places even where there are Muslims, why Indonesia? I say to people that Indonesia is my favorite country in the world, but that doesn't mean I don't see that there's certain challenges. It's just not going to be what I'm going to deal with this time. I'm going to get to challenges. I really want to get to some of the just amazing things. First of all, okay, you have to take into consideration where we're located on the globe, which is very close to the equator. And what that means is that all year round, think about this, those of you who have 4 seasons, all year round, the sun will rise at almost the exact same time in the evening that it will set. And that time, I'm gonna kind of like round it up. So it's about 6 o'clock in the morning where you're sure that you have good light, and about 6 o'clock in the evening where you're sure to be in the dark. All year round. There's a variant of maybe 20-25 minutes, but I went to graduate school in the state of Michigan in the United States. and we had long nights in the wintertime. And we had long days in the summertime. Even now when I go to visit the US and it's, a certain part of the season, it's like, why is the sun still up and it's 8 o'clock? Like my brain cannot accept it anymore. So I am the type of person, I'm a day person. I have a day chart in my astrology. And by natural rhythm, I respond to about the time when the call for the first prayer comes, from the many mosques. So I'm up, and so it helps me to be in a place where the sun is gonna be there shortly after I get up, after I do my own, prayers and meditations, and I go for a walk before the sun gets up too high because it'll get hotter, So I love the fact that the length of the day is pretty much going to be the same all year round, which means that one of the reasons I like to come to this region of the world, Southeast Asia, when I started being challenged in terms of fasting the long summer days in North America. And when I came to this part of the world, I could maintain the fast during the full schedule. It was not a challenge that debilitated me. And so alhamdulillah, I managed to get in, 5 or 6 more years before even that just, didn't come through for me. So I love this ease with which one can sustain that particular practice, the practice of fasting, because for a person like me who, I'm kind of like brain dead at 7 o'clock in the evening, it helps that it's also dark, So the length of the day when you're near the equator suits my personhood very well. That's one factor. The climate. When my grandson was here and we did a recording together and he said, yeah, it's really humid here. I think the first time that I experienced it way back in 1989 when I first came to this region, I was going to Malaysia, and the door opened in the air-conditioned airport to the outside, and the first thing that occurred to me was somebody needs to open the window. The air is so thick, but as I've acclimated myself to it, it is the best weather for, again, my body type. It's not for everybody. Apparently it's not for my grandson, for example. I love him dearly, so this is not a critique. But for me, who has dry skin, dry hair, dry eyes, I enjoy the fact that there is enough moisture in the air that literally, I don't wear lotion. And when I go back to visit family in the US and I look and see, ashy arms and legs, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, we're not in the tropics anymore. So I love the humidity. I actually don't like cold weather, and cold is relative, but to be honest, there are certain things that my body doesn't function very well. So anything in the 60s Fahrenheit or less than 20 centigrade, my body's reaction, and also it triggers my depression, is not so strong. It's not my, it's not my thing, So I live in perpetual warm and humid climate, and that suits my temperament, my personality, my body type, everything. I, as a senior person, have understood that nutrition is one of the ways in which we self-care. So I don't eat everything that I could eat when I was younger. I will have probably all those things maybe once, a year or a month or something like that. So in other words, nutritionally, I eat, basically real food. Real meat, real fish, real, vegetables, real fruit. No packaged things, no, like I don't need anything other than what is available at our traditional markets here. And the traditional markets, from all of this lush farmland, is supplied by local foods. Yes, we have some imported things. To be honest, I eat beef that's imported either in Australia, New Zealand, or the United States in a particular shop that is way overpriced. But the quality of the local beef, sorry to say, is not something that works for my limited diet. So I do pay for imported beef, but other than that, everything, all the free range chickens, free range eggs that goes with that, lots of fish, fresh water and salt water, like everything that I need to sustain myself is available because I mostly cook at home, and I enjoy that. And I don't want to say it's cheap. I don't want to say it's inexpensive. I want to say that you can actually feed yourself in a country like Indonesia with around $2 a day. And that's luxurious because some people, all the aspects of their lives is covered with $2 a day. So for you to eat with $2 a day, which over the course of the month, $50, $60. Yes, that's right. I could eat for the rest of my life, like literally based on the money I currently have in the bank, for example, and I still have, income from pensions and stuff like that. So poverty exists plentifully here based on sort of UN standards of development. However, one of the consequences of poverty here is not as much soul shaming humiliation as I used to experience struggling financially in the US with 5 children. And that includes the fact that you want to eat healthy, you want to provide healthy food for your children, but the cost of eating a basic necessity, the cost of eating could be a challenge, and it's not here. It doesn't mean that people don't have like really fancy restaurants and they can charge way more than the average person here would eat for a meal. Yes, they've got that too, and it's great. More power to them, because I'm all for people promoting their own businesses, and I also like food that come from different countries. So yes, I like to go to a restaurant that serves something that isn't the local food. So yes, you can also pay $10, $15, $20 maybe for a meal. Here, I don't think I've ever paid $20, but I'm just trying to give you a clue that what it takes for you to eat out in a place like the United States and what it takes for you to eat to survive here, again, juxtaposed to each other. Now, I did this thing about the cost of dying, and I'm not going to detail it, but all of my end of life statements and my will is now linked to my current location, because in agreement with my children, I plan to die and be buried in this place, because the cost of being buried is 200 to 300% more in the United States. And you don't necessarily have automatically the things that I prefer to observe as a Muslim. So it's huge, okay? So the cost of housing was the first thing that kind of inspired me, being able to find a house literally that for 1 year cost me less than I had been paying to share a house with one of my family members for a month. So in other words, basic rental costs is at least 10, 12 times higher in some place like the US. So the cost factor, the climate factor, the cycle of the sun in terms of sunrise, sunset, and the closeness to the equator. The water here, when you go to the ocean, is not something you have to brace for. Now, I've been to places like Australia and South Africa during their under the equator summer, so the air is hot, the sand is hot, the water is so freaking cold. And so even though, you want to get in it and kind of cool off and everything, yeah, it's cold. Whereas here, when you go to the water, it's cool. There's a little tippedness to it, but you don't have to brace yourself, all the time. Of course, seasonally, depending on the cycles of the rain and what's happening with the ocean in terms of its access to sun at the beach, there will be some places where it'd be a little bit cooler, but never kind of like abrasive. So the water temperature is fantastic. And so the idea, again, just the words, what they trigger in my mind, I retire to a tropical island. Those words means I have access to the beach, and the beaches are just so easy to go to. All the beaches are free and public. Even if you have a fancy hotel that kind of sets up chairs that they only let their, customers use, you will find that there will also be chairs set up by someone who's like renting them for like $8, $10, for the whole day, So yes, I love having access to the ocean. Of course, as I said, I learned how to dive. I'm gonna talk about that. The other things, however, have to do with the temperament of the people. Islam was brought here by Sufis or the mystics and the traders. It was not brought by any war or conflict regionally or locally. It's had its own wars and conflicts, but it wasn't the transition or the introduction of Islam through those military ways, as was most places in the world. And remember, Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world, and there are more Indonesian Muslims than all the Arabic-speaking Muslims. So this is a kind of particular hub of Islam, which is, what I would analyze as agrarian-based. Now, the agricultural part of Indonesia, especially, having lived here for a year in this rice village, a little more than a year, given that I also stayed here before my house was ready. The full gestation of the plant is about 3 months, which means you could have 3 or 4 crop cycles a year, and people do. That's what happens. And something is always in growth at different places in the process of the rice production, and I'm also going to do a video on that, so if you haven't seen it, look for it. But the thing is that I have learned to experience this replenishment of life and nutrition through this particular plant that has given me a whole renewed sense of life. So life unfolding, things growing, you have to cut them back because they grow so abundantly. Trust me, when you get to the old age and your whole growth process is also slowing down, it is the most wonderful thing to see. That Islam is agrarian based also means that there is a kind of gentle, replenishing attitude about Islam that the people live and practice here. And oh man, that makes such a difference to my soul. Like, I like to talk about that Allah is Al-Hayy, the living. And to be in a place where life is constantly being replenished, as what happens, in the tropics, shines a certain kind of light on my own heart in terms of my surrender or my relationship with the Creator or being a Muslim. So the whole setup of the subtlety of the way Islam is practiced here is like number one of all my experiences, all 60 countries I've ever been in. The other thing is they have invested in this pesantren system, which is a boarding school scenario. You talk about Islamic schools and you always, want to give it a bad name or whatever, but you need to see these places. They're nurturing environments. It's it's very communal, you know, so you have, you know, kids, it's a boarding school, so they stay there all the time, you know, so they sleep 12 people a room or whatever, but it's like camp. It's like when you send your kids to camp and they, you know, whatever, so they are relaxed, they have fun. I'm sure there's, you know, group politics. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's that much of a utopia. But the thing is that when you have an entire culture of people whose training in certain aspects of Islam and Islamic thought and Islamic studies starts when you get to people my age, people younger than me, whatever, there is a kind of intellectual milieu that is so deep that Islam is just not shallow. I have lots of calligraphy in my house, you know, from my travels and whatnot. And at one point, my helper was talking about that her husband cannot read the Arabic. And I don't know, just being who I am, I immediately sort of tested her with some statement that was there, and she read it in Arabic and she told me what it means. So she doesn't, it's not just they know the letters, they know these little things about Islam, and it's embedded in the culture. So it has developed into not only a very progressive way of thinking about Islam, it's also an Islam that's very inclusive, and it is an Islam that is intellectually rigorous and revitalized, renewed, you know, all the time in terms of infusions of new thoughts, new students, and new institutions, and new learnings, new lessons. So the way of Islam here for me, intellectually, physically, that is in terms of the body and the environment, and spiritually, is more integrated. Like, I know of all the activists, sort of spiritual, mystical, good people type things who are also intellectually sharp or rigorous and politically savvy and engaged. They come together here in actual people more than I've seen in any place else that I've been. And sometimes, you know, it's a trade-off. Like, you have to trade off the intellectual in order to get with some spiritual people. And you have to trade off the spiritual when you get with some activists. So I have been living with this trade-off thing. However, it is much easier for me to get all three of these things that to me are equally essential to each other, to get them all in harmony together. But before I go, I do want you to take the time to check out the video that I'm going to link in the comment section, because it's free and available public, so, you know, I can share it. And the thing is, just feast your eyes. Most of the things that they're showing there, I have been to those places and seen those things. There's one of them that has to do with a place that has toxic air and everything. I have not been there, don't want to go there, but check it out. Also, like, subscribe, share this video with your friends. Make a comment, because, yeah, help a sister out. Bye. Salam.